"You're not my daughter anymore," my mom whispered. So I left the wedding and sent the police. Before I tell you my whole story, let me know in the comments what part of the world you're listening to me from. My name is Marina Rodriguez. I'm 34 years old, and I work as a registered nurse at Houston Methodist Hospital. For 15 years, I've been the responsible daughter who stepped up when Dad died suddenly, leaving Mom struggling with grief and mounting bills. I've always been the problem solver, the one everyone calls when life gets complicated. But today, sitting in my car outside the police station, I realized that being the reliable daughter nearly destroyed my life. When Dad passed in 2009, I was 19 with dreams of traveling the world. Instead, I watched Mom crumble while my 15-year-old sister Julia retreated into teenage life. Someone had to hold our family together, and that someone was always me. I postponed college, worked double shifts, and made sure the mortgage got paid while Mom figured out how to function without Dad. 3 years later, I enrolled in nursing school but never moved out. Mom said she needed me close, that the house felt empty. Julia went to college on a cheerleading scholarship, visiting holidays with her perfect boyfriend, while I studied between shifts, building a career to support us all. Mom always lit up when Julia walked through the door, gaining energy I rarely heard when managing daily bills with me. Over the years, I watched a clear pattern emerge. Julia would call crying about some crisis, and Mom would turn to me with expectant eyes. Car payments, credit card debt, emergency flights home. Each time, I opened my wallet, telling myself this was what families did. This was love in action. When Julia announced her engagement to Derek last year, Mom was over the moon. They wanted a spring wedding, elegant but not expensive, maybe 150 guests. But the budget kept climbing. The venue cost $8,000. Julia's dress was $2,500. The photographer was $3,500. Each time Mom's face fell at price quotes, I reached for my checkbook. I told myself it was an investment in family happiness. Julia deserved a beautiful wedding, and Mom deserved to see her youngest celebrate love after losing Dad. When Mom mentioned her Social Security barely covered expenses, I covered the difference. When Julia explained Derek's family was contributing to the honeymoon, I stepped up for flowers and catering. Before I knew it, I'd committed nearly $40,000 from my life savings. But watching Mom's face light up as she discussed centerpieces with Julia made every sacrifice worthwhile. For the first time since Dad's death, she seemed genuinely excited. I organized vendor meetings around hospital shifts, researched flowers during lunch breaks, and spent weekends visiting venues to create my sister's perfect day. Comments about head tables looking best with even numbers, suggestions that maybe I should skip professional photos since I'd be coordinating vendors, little exclusions that felt logical, but left me strangely empty. I pushed those feelings aside, focusing on the joy I was creating for the people I loved most. The morning of Julia's wedding dawned perfect, the kind of spring day that felt like a blessing. I woke early in our shared hotel suite, mind racing through my timeline. Vendors needed coordinating, emergencies handled, and somehow, I needed to transform from wedding planner to sister in time for the ceremony. By 10 a.m., I'd solved 3 vendor issues and confirmed everything was on schedule. The photographer arrived right on time, a talented woman named Sarah, whose portfolio had made Julia cry. I introduced myself as the sister and point person, expecting to coordinate getting ready shots. That's when I noticed the first strange look between Sarah and Mom. Sarah pulled out her shot list, and I leaned in to review our timeline. But Mom quickly stepped between us, voice unusually sharp. They'd made last-minute changes to keep things intimate. Getting ready photos would focus on just bride and mother. I'd be coordinating vendors anyway, so it made sense, right? I felt hurt but pushed it aside. This was Julia's day, and if intimate photos made her comfortable, I understood. I smiled and agreed, though Mom's tone felt different, almost defensive. The pattern continued all morning. The makeup artist had appointments for 2 people, not 3. Mom explained I was naturally beautiful and barely needed makeup. Plus, wouldn't I be too busy ensuring everything ran smoothly? The hairstylist had the same limitation. Again, Mom complimented my thick, manageable hair that always looked great with minimal effort. Each exclusion came with compliments that made arguing difficult. I was too capable, too naturally gorgeous, too essential to the day's success to participate in traditional preparations. But with each explanation, I felt myself becoming invisible, relegated to the background of an event I'd spent months and my savings creating. By 2 o'clock, the venue was transformed into something magical. Every detail was perfect, from the string quartet to carefully arranged place cards I'd spent hours calligraphing. Guests were arriving, and I should have been getting ready. But I was still troubleshooting in jeans and a t-shirt. Mom found me adjusting centerpieces and said I needed to hurry and change. Family photos were starting in 30 minutes. I rushed to the bridal suite, quickly applied makeup, and slipped into my navy dress chosen to complement Julia's colors. It wasn't the full glamour experience I'd expected, but I looked presentable and felt ready to finally step into my role as sister of the bride. When I arrived at the photo location, Sarah was positioning Mom and Julia for intimate family portraits. I approached with a smile, ready to join them, when Mom held up her hand like a stop sign. Her expression was serious as she explained they were doing immediate family only, shots first. Just her and Julia, capturing their special bond. I stood confused, wondering when I'd stopped being immediate family. Mom's explanation felt rehearsed, like she'd practiced this conversation. They wanted special photos together first, then larger family groupings. It made sense, I told myself, even as my stomach twisted. I waited on the sidelines, watching my mother and sister pose together, faces glowing with joy I wasn't part of. 20 minutes passed, then 30. Sarah had taken dozens of photos of Mom and Julia in various poses around the venue. They looked like they were having the time of their lives, laughing and embracing, creating memories I was watching from 10 feet away. Other family members arrived for what I assumed would be extended family photos, but Mom waved them off. That's when I realized this wasn't about getting intimate shots first. This was the family photo session, and I wasn't invited. Standing there in my carefully chosen dress, watching them create keepsake memories without me, I felt something crack in my chest. This wasn't oversight or scheduling misunderstanding. This was intentional. The worst part was everyone else seemed to know. Aunts and uncles milled around awkwardly, avoiding eye contact. Cousins whispered among themselves, shooting sympathetic glances. Even the photographer kept checking her timeline uncomfortably, as if she'd been warned about this family dynamic. The ceremony was beautiful, exactly what Julia had dreamed of. I stood in back with extended family, watching my sister marry, under an arch of flowers I'd chosen and paid for. The string quartet played processional music I'd selected after listening to dozens of options. Everything was perfect, except for the growing hollowness in my chest as I witnessed my family from the outside. During cocktail hour, I tried shaking off the morning's exclusions and focusing on celebration. Guests complimented the beautiful details, and I felt pride knowing I'd helped create this magical day. Maybe the photo situation had been a misunderstanding. Maybe Mom was just stressed by emotion. Weddings made people act strangely sometimes. But as dinner was announced and guests found assigned seats, final puzzle pieces clicked into place. I searched for my name among place cards I'd handwritten and found myself at table 8, between Mom's elderly neighbors and Derek's college friends I'd never met. Meanwhile, table 1 held immediate family: Mom, Julia, and Derek, his parents, and his sister serving as maid of honor. The seating arrangement told a story I'd been too naive to read. I wasn't family celebrating this milestone. I was a distant relative invited out of obligation, placed far enough from the head table to be forgotten, but close enough that my absence would have been conspicuous. Looking around at the reception I'd designed and funded, I felt like a ghost haunting someone else's party. During dinner, I watched Mom give a heartfelt speech about Julia finding her soulmate. She talked about being proud of her daughter's accomplishments, kindness, bright future. She never mentioned the daughter who'd sacrificed her 20s to keep the family afloat, who'd worked overtime to pay for this very celebration. The omission was so complete, it felt deliberate. After dinner, the photographer gathered family for formal portraits. This time, when I approached the group, Mom didn't just wave me off. She pulled me aside, ostensibly for a private mother-daughter moment, and delivered words that shattered 15 years of devoted daughterhood. Her voice was barely a whisper, but her words cut through wedding music like a blade. She told me this day was about her real daughter, the one who'd brought joy and pride to the family. Then she looked directly into my eyes and spoke words I'll never forget. You're not my daughter anymore." The casualness of her cruelty took my breath away. She delivered this devastating rejection with the same tone she'd used to comment on weather, then turned back to the photo session as if nothing had happened. I stood stunned, feeling slapped in front of 100 witnesses who somehow hadn't noticed. But I had noticed. I noticed how she'd excluded me all day while accepting my financial contributions. I noticed how she'd positioned herself as the devoted mother while erasing the daughter who'd actually devoted herself to family survival. Most importantly, I noticed this wasn't emotional outburst or wedding stress. This was calculated, intentional, meant to put me in my place once and for all. I didn't make a scene. I didn't cry or argue or try explaining how much I'd sacrificed for this moment. Instead, I quietly walked to my table, gathered my purse, and left the reception I'd paid for. As I reached my car, muscle memory made me check my phone for the vendor timeline I'd created. Then I deleted the entire document. I was done being the invisible foundation holding up other people's happiness. It was time to build something for myself, starting with a trip to the police station to report the credit cards and loans I'd discovered that morning in Mom's purse, all fraudulently opened in my name. The real crime wasn't just financial. It was 15 years of emotional fraud. I drove straight from the venue to Harris County Sheriff's Office, my navy dress still perfectly pressed, mind finally crystal clear. The desk sergeant took one look at me and immediately offered assistance. When I explained I needed to report identity theft and financial fraud by family members, his expression shifted to professional concern, mixed with personal sympathy. The paperwork felt surreal, listing my mother, Elena Rodriguez, and sister, Julia Rodriguez Mitchell, as suspects in multiple felonies seemed like writing fiction. But the evidence was undeniably real. 3 credit cards opened in my name over 18 months, balances totaling $47,000. A personal loan for $12,000 I'd never applied for. A store credit account with $8,000 in charges for furniture I'd never purchased. Detective Williams reviewed documents with growing concern. This wasn't simple family borrowing gone wrong. This was systematic identity theft, executed by people with access to my personal information and complete confidence I'd never report them. The timing was calculating, with most accounts open during Julia's engagement when I was distracted by wedding planning and likely to miss subtle credit changes. What made it worse was discovering they'd used my nursing license number and hospital employment as credibility boosters for loan applications. My professional reputation, built through years of education and ethical practice, had been weaponized to steal from my financial future. Detective Williams explained that professional license fraud carried additional penalties, elevating this from simple identity theft to more serious crime. As I provided statement after statement, detailing 15 years of financial manipulation disguised as family responsibility, I felt something profound happening inside me. Each time I said, "I didn't authorize this transaction," or "I never applied for this credit," I was reclaiming power I'd voluntarily surrendered. For the first time in my adult life, I was setting boundaries and demanding accountability. The irony wasn't lost on me that, while they celebrated Julia's new beginning with my money, I was documenting their crimes in a sterile police station. The wedding reception was probably in full swing, guests enjoying the open bar I'd funded while my mother and sister accepted congratulations for throwing such a beautiful celebration. Meanwhile, I was ensuring they'd face consequences for treating my generosity as their entitlement. Detective Williams explained the investigation process and warned that pressing charges against family often resulted in permanent estrangement. When I confirmed I wanted to proceed with prosecution, his expression told me he'd seen this scenario before. Families who prey on their most generous members, confident that love and guilt would prevent accountability. The most empowering moment came when Detective Williams asked what outcome I hoped for. I realized I wasn't seeking revenge or trying to hurt anyone. I wanted justice, accountability, and protection from future manipulation. I wanted my good credit restored and financial security rebuilt. Most importantly, I wanted the confidence that comes from finally choosing my own well-being over other people's comfort. By the time I finished giving my statement, the wedding reception was winding down. My phone showed dozens of missed calls and texts, starting with confusion about my early departure and escalating to panic as Mom and Julia realized the financial implications of my absence from their lives. Messages ranged from guilt-inducing pleas to angry demands that I stop being dramatic. I turned off my phone and drove home to my apartment, the first place I'd ever lived alone. It was modest but mine, decorated with furniture I'd chosen and paid for myself. No family photos crowded the walls, no guilt-inducing reminders of obligations, just a peaceful space where I could think clearly about the life I wanted to build. 6 months after that devastating wedding day, I was living a life I barely recognized. I'd started dating again, something impossible when every spare moment was consumed by family obligations. I'd enrolled in a nurse practitioner program, using money I'd previously spent on other people's emergencies to invest in my professional future. Most dramatically, I discovered what it felt like to be genuinely loved by people who valued my happiness as much as their own. The criminal cases resulted in plea bargains requiring full restitution, plus penalties. Mom was sentenced to probation and community service, while Julia received a suspended sentence contingent on paying back every stolen dollar. More importantly, both women now had fraud convictions on their records, making future financial manipulation much more difficult. The family members who'd witnessed my exclusion from wedding photos began reaching out with apologies. Many had felt uncomfortable watching my mistreatment but hadn't known how to intervene. Their support validated my decision to prioritize my well-being over family harmony. I thought standing up for myself would leave me isolated, but it revealed which relationships were based on genuine affection versus obligation and guilt. My nursing colleagues noticed the change in my energy and attitude. Without constant stress of managing other people's financial crises, I was more present with patients and engaged with professional development. My supervisor recommended me for leadership training, recognizing qualities that had been overshadowed by personal exhaustion. The most unexpected development was reconnecting with dreams I'd set aside 15 years earlier. I'd always wanted to travel, to see the world beyond hospital and family obligations. With my finances finally stable and schedule truly my own, I booked a trip to Italy, something impossible when my income was constantly diverted to family emergencies. Standing in the Sistine Chapel, surrounded by centuries of artistic achievement, I thought about the woman who'd left that wedding reception 6 months earlier. She'd been broken and betrayed, but not defeated. She'd chosen the difficult path of accountability over familiar comfort of enabling dysfunction. Most importantly, she'd finally learned that protecting herself wasn't selfish. It was necessary for becoming the person she was meant to be. Today, when people ask about my family, I tell them honestly that I have wonderful chosen family and have learned to distinguish between people who love me and people who love what I can do for them. The difference has transformed every relationship in my life. I no longer attract people seeking a caretaker because I no longer present myself as endlessly available for other people's convenience. If you're reading this and recognize yourself in my story, please know that choosing yourself isn't cruel or selfish. It's necessary. You deserve relationships based on mutual respect and genuine affection, not transactions disguised as love. You deserve to build a life that reflects your own values and dreams, not spend forever trying to repair other people's choices. The hardest part of setting boundaries isn't dealing with other people's anger. It's overcoming your own guilt for finally putting yourself first. But on the other side of that guilt lies a life you never imagined possible, surrounded by people who celebrate your happiness instead of exploiting your generosity. Take it from someone who learned this lesson at 34. It's never too late to rewrite your story, and you don't need anyone's permission to choose yourself.